5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
And with that, welcome to your Mini Mosh podcast. I am your host, Shane Beauregard, coming at you with all your news, reviews, and previews on what to watch on your streamer services, your television, and your local theater. Finally back, folks. It's been a long 3 weeks. I think it's been 3 weeks. As you can see, I at least have half my intro up. I was able to figure that part out, which doesn't take a brainiac. But I'm still trying to find a good music piece to attach to that, like it was in my original. I am still working on that. I'd like to thank everyone for sticking with me. Sometimes this life throws you curveballs, folks, and I'm not complaining about it, but sometimes you have to adjust. I had to take a step back, take like a week or two, because I just had a lot of stuff going on. And then I took a trip out to Seattle. First time out on the West Coast. Formerly, I should say second time, but first time I wasn't allowed to go anywhere, being on a military post. So, long story short, it was my first time to be able to roam free on the West Coast. And it was a great time. So I hope everyone had a great Memorial Day. I'm finally getting back into this. I've seen a shit ton of stuff, but I'm only going to give you a couple reviews. I'm going to try to keep it nice and short and hopefully just keep this thing rolling. So some of the news I have is older news, but you know what? I'm going to talk about it anyway. And a lot of this is trailer talk. So the Internals trailer finally came out like 2 weeks ago, and everyone was, I don't know. I don't know what everyone was looking at when they looked at that trailer. I just thought, meh, it's okay. Yeah, we got to see Jon Snow and Robb Stark. That was cool, but that's it. I mean, this is still, again, and I say this every time I talk about a Marvel project or a DC project. I'm in the theater seeing it, okay? I'm in the theater seeing it. They have my money. But I was very underwhelmed with this trailer. Just like the Venom 2 trailer. What are you going to, tonally, I don't know what they're going for. Either be a comedy, be dark and edgy, or I just don't know. I don't know if they know how to walk that fine balance and that fine edge of dipping their toes into both. It makes me nervous. And I'm just glad they got rid of the Ronald McDonald hair on Woody Harrelson. Oh, because he looked terrible at the end of the first Venom. The Forever Purge, I'm probably the minority. I love the Purge series. All 4 movies are watchable, entertaining. They're entertaining, and I just like them. So anytime they're on, I'll watch them. So this one's got my money. I like that. The Last Night in Soho, the new Edgar Wright movie. Now, I like Edgar Wright, and I know this is sacrilege to kind of talk shit about Edgar Wright. This one makes me worried. Why? Because it has Nicholas Winding Refn tones. And if you know who he is, he's responsible for 2, if I had to think about it, probably 3 of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life. Valhalla Rising, Only God Forgives, and The Neon Demon. Terrible, terrible, terrible. The only movie he produced and made that I actually liked was Drive with Ryan Gosling. So this one to me had those stylistic vibes. Even though he's light years better than Nicholas Winding Refn, that one had me just a little worried. Kevin Spacey's back in the news. He's actually acting in his first movie since the whole controversy, but he's over in Italy. It's an Italian drama. It's a very small part. It's called The Man Who Drew God. I think that's what it's called. So yeah, I mean, good for him. Good for him. Timothy Chalamet is in an unnecessary Willy Wonka origin film where he's playing Willy Wonka. And even more unnecessary news, Pet Sematary is getting a remake. The sequel, I guess the remake is getting a sequel. A little tongue-tied, folks. So yeah, that's all the news I'm going to cover. Let's get into the shows that I've been watching and just are wrapping up as we speak. And I'll probably review them in some upcoming episodes. And one movie I finished this past weekend where I'll talk about it next week. I just don't want to get into it this week. And I did finally make it back to the movies, folks. My movie pass is good to go. I saw A Quiet Place 2. I'll give you spoiler-free, just kind of my initial thoughts on that movie coming up at the tail end of this episode. So I finished Jupiter's Legacy, the Netflix show with Josh Duhamel. I will say it's a step up from his Taco Bell commercials. Uneven show. I'll get into that. Castlevania, I have 2 episodes left. That show is absolutely amazing. I'm halfway through The Woman in the Window. I like it, even though critically it's getting slammed and by the audience. So far, it's okay to me. And we just wrapped up Angelina Jolie and John Bernthal in Those Who Wish Me Dead. So that is for upcoming episodes coming out on Netflix this weekend, or is out right now. You have season 2 of Ragnarok, which is a little watch show. It's a Swedish show, and it is based around Thor and his brother Loki, but in a modern setting where they don't know who they are yet as far as powers go. They move to a strange town. All this stuff is kind of happening. I actually like the first season. It is subtitled. It's about 6-7 episodes. It's a foreign show, obviously, so you gotta like some of the dialogue's wonky, but I actually did like it. Season 2 is out right now. You have season 1 of Sweet Tooth coming out this week. Black Summer 2, which is another zombie show, but I really liked it. And then I think next week you have Fatherhood with Kevin Hart, which I cannot watch that movie because I don't know what's happened to me, folks. Yeah, as I get older, these movies they get to me. I'll admit it. I'm a man. They get to me. So this one just seemed a little too much for me in that department. So I'm going to leave that one alone. Oh, another piece of news. Amazon purchased, now again, this happened like 2 weeks ago, but they purchased MGM for I think it's 8.45 or $8.5 billion, folks. $billion with a B. So now they own every property MGM owns. I mean, look, it's happening. I mean, HBO and Warner Brothers, Netflix signed that Sony deal. Now Amazon is taking over MGM. So I don't know where this leaves the future of theaters. Again, I think a lot of them will be closing up, even if we get back to normal, just because of the hit they took over the last year and a half. Again, here in Greensboro, only 2 theaters survived so far. Or I should say, yeah, 2. A local one and the Regal Cinemas so far. All right, so let's get into the box office, because there actually was a box office. I was surprised on how many people actually showed up to the theater on Thursday night, opening night for A Quiet Place 2. Coming in at number 5, The Wrath of Man, bringing in $2.2 million. Coming in at number 4, you have Spiral, the Saw spinoff starring Chris Rock, bringing in $2.3 million. Coming in at number 3, you have Raya and the Last Dragon, bringing in $2.4. Emma Stone's Cruella, bringing in $21.5, and A Quiet Place 2, bringing in $47.5 million. But I think over the course of, you add Thursday in there, I think its total was $58 million. So it was nice to see people back in the theater. And yeah, they did have everyone spread out. They did follow protocol, so I felt extremely safe in there. Coming out this week, you have The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. But I think I'm going to backtrack and go see The Wrath of Man. I've been wanting to see that with Jason Statham. That's the Guy Ritchie film. So hopefully that'll be on the docket for this coming weekend. Now let's get into the movies I'm going to review, or at least talk about, because I tried to come up with a coherent review for this movie and I just couldn't do it. My notes are all over the place. My thoughts are all over the place. And that is Wonder Woman 1984. The only reason I watched this is I had a cross-country flight, and they had the in-house entertainment. That was one of the movies, so I figured, why not? So let's roll. Whew, boy, this one's sitting at 59% critic score to 74% audience score on Rotten Tomato. The newest cast members to this movie, as you know, is Kristen Wiig playing Cheetah, and Pedro Pascal playing Maxwell Lord. And this movie was all over the place. First of all, it started out like a comedy. You had the opening mall scene. I guess I'll just talk about some certain scenes in this movie. You had the mall scene, which to me was totally unnecessary. You had the Amazonian scene that actually opened the movie, which was too long. This movie's 2 hours and like 38 minutes. This movie's about an hour of bloat and mess. They could have shaved an hour off, starting with the opening Amazonian scene. I'm sure there's a lesson in there that tied to the very last scene of this movie, which was fucking terrible too. They didn't need a 25-minute scene for like 2 lines of dialogue, but apparently that's what they did here. Then you go into the mall scene where this jeweler store was a front for some ancient artifact that they were trying to steal. That whole scene played like a comedy. It didn't work. And how many times are we going to see, and trust me, Gal Gadot did what she does in this movie. She's hot. I love her. I love her. But how many times are we going to do that slow? Are we going to see that slow motion leg kick in this movie? I mean, good lord. So anyway, Kristen Wiig's character is an over-the-top nerd who's sent in to help Diane with this artifact. Meanwhile, Maxwell Lord's this wannabe billionaire who suckered everyone to a Ponzi scheme, and he wants to get his hands on this thing. So that's kind of like the basis of the movie. This thing is able to grant you wishes. Hence, that's why Chris Pine gets to come back in a weird, nonsensical way. But it was campy, it was cheesy. I was fine with it until they stole a plane from a museum, and he hasn't flown since, like, let's say fucking 1892, until he hops into a more modern day jet or plane, and yeah, he flies it no problem. Well, a little bit of problem, but he flies it. No way. Okay, I know this is an action movie, and I know I'm supposed to like put my brain on hold, but come on, man. I mean, I bought into the fact that Vin Diesel almost catapulted his car from one cliff across the ocean to another cliff. I found that more believable for some reason in my mind than that scene. On top of that, hence you get your invisible jet. Yeah, up until this point though, she practiced on a coffee mug and lost it. But for some reason now she can turn the entire plane invisible for the entire trip from Washington, D.C. to Egypt. Oh, in that flight, however, Chris Pine gives this weird speech where he kind of ties in where flying's kind of like surfing. You got to catch the wave and just feel it. That's what I got out of that conversation. But in that, we get Wonder Woman flying, and that's exactly what she does. She like feels the air currents or whatever and catches that wave. Okay. I'm sorry. That just makes me laugh. I mean, seriously, that's how she learned how to fly. She ran his speech over in her head, and that did it. And the fact that she's catching lightning bolts now with her lasso, oof, boy. Yeah, and then okay, so again, I'm trying to collect my thoughts here. I didn't mind Christine Wiig. I didn't mind Cheetah until the very, very last scene in the movie. Well, let's talk about that too. Wonder Woman does something to her which really should have killed her, and I was like, wow, she's going to straight up murder Cheetah. But she survives. Then the very last scene is utterly ridiculous. It would have never happened. You know, Maxwell Lord Pedro Pascal, which was fine. He was over the top cheesy in this movie. I didn't mind it. His son was very annoying, and he only was in there for like the plot to be furthered and give him some character at the end of the movie, which to me was a little too late in the game for that. He obtained all this power, but the world is on the brink of just destruction. That's what happens when they use this gem or artifact. It was made by a god. And yeah, so it ruins civilizations. And Wonder Woman somehow, which she gets his lasso around him, which you don't see on screen, but you see it off screen, and she gives this big speech and turns everything around. And that speech was ridiculous. The ending was absurd. Oh, man, this movie was just all over the place for me. I'm on record. I know that was probably, for me, that was even a jumbled, nonsensical review. But again, and I don't know why people can't criticize Patty Jenkins more than they did. I mean, is it because she's a female director and they're untouchable now? Like, God forbid you shit on a female director. And I like Patty Jenkins. I liked her ever since Point Break. I loved Hurt Locker. Near Dark, I loved. I mean, she's a good director. But she shit the bed on this one. And I hate to say it. I mean, I agree with the critics. It's the worst DC movie to date. Of the current DC movies. Like, I would watch Suicide Squad or Birds of Prey or even the Joss Whedon fucking Justice League back to back before I put this in again. I will never see this movie again. It was terrible. I'm going to give it a 2 out of 5. That's it. Good Lord. My kids enjoyed it, and my wife enjoyed it. And they gave me crap, because they're like, well, you know too much of the background, you nitpick too much. Maybe part of that's true. But listen, my kids are 10 and 7. Yeah, okay, so they did enjoy it because they don't have to think about anything. But I think the average fan would walk into this and be like, what the hell is going on with some of these scenes? So, woo! Finally saw it. Now, I'll follow it up with a movie. When I got done watching it, really made me think. And if a movie does that, generally you like it. And that is A Promising Young Woman, sitting at 90% critic score, an 88% audience score, starring Carey Mulligan, Laverne Cox, Bo Burnham, Clancy Brown, Jennifer Coolidge, Alison Brie, and Connie Britton. Alfred Molina as well. Good cast, really good cast. You've seen the trailers for this movie. Carey Mulligan, after watching this performance, I don't know how she didn't walk away with the Oscar. She was she was enrolled in medical school, and something happened to one of her friends, Nina. She was raped. We do know that part going in. And she starts going to these clubs and acting like she's drunk. And she takes out revenge among these men because they're always like trying to be nice to her, trying to take her home. Then they try to have sex with her while she's passed out. So, very powerful movie. I would say it's a very strong movie for women, and it really shines a light on the kind of culture and kind of the power that guys have with the he said, she said. So as this movie is going along, she's extracting her plan on certain people that were involved in this Nina situation. Now I'm going to talk about this spoiler free, and it is a plotting movie, but it works. And so she works at a coffee shop. She still lives with her parents, played by Clancy Brown and Jennifer Coolidge. She just turned 30, and I thought what was funny, they bought her a suitcase because they want her to get the fuck out. Clancy Brown is like the doting father who likes her there. Jennifer Coolidge doesn't understand why she's not making more of herself. But she has a plan. She doesn't want that stuff. She just wants revenge. Along the way, she meets Bo Burnham, who was in medical school with her. They start going out. But a good revenge movie. And what I liked about this movie is it paints the picture. Because this is not a graphic movie until like the very, I'd say, last 10 minutes. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be. In that regard, they paint enough of a mental picture where you don't need to see anything that happens between certain people. I'll leave it at that. That's the best description I can give it. I really wish, though, they would have had one redeemable guy in this movie, character. One is kind of, you think he's going to be, and it never happens. But again, you understand why. In the end, this is the part that I had to really think about. I was shocked at the ending of this movie. And I was really upset about it when it first happened because obviously I wanted it to turn out a certain way. But after I got done thinking about it, I didn't mind it as much. I thought it was a smart ending. Not the ending I would have preferred, but anyway, it sets up her plan perfectly. It was the first full-length feature film by director and writer Emerald Fennell. Up until this point, she's done short films, and I thought this was a strong, strong debut. And I actually like Bo Burnham in this movie. Like, the cast was great, but he's the one who wrote and directed Eighth Grade. Obviously, he started as a comedian, one of those singing comedians. I never got that shtick. I didn't like him for that, but he's actually a decent actor. I enjoyed him in this movie, but man, Carey Mulligan is what really, man, what a performance is all I'm going to say. So I agree with the critics and the audience score. If you have not seen this, if you're on the fence about it, if you think it's going to be too gory or too violent, it's really not. It's a movie that'll make you think. It's a movie that is relevant, definitely relevant to the time that we live in. Without, does it bash you in the head a little bit? Yes. My favorite scenes before I give this a final grade is after she brings the first guy home. There's a part where she's walking across the street and these construction guys are giving her catcalls, and she basically just eating her hamburger and staring her down and not saying a goddamn word until she kind of scares the guys off. I love that scene. It's a short scene, but when she goes back to her old school and Connie Britton plays the dean, to me that was my favorite scene of the movie. Those two scenes stand out for me. I agree. I give this movie a 4.5 out of 5. It's one of the best movies I've seen in the recent year. Again, if you're on the fence, go check out A Promising Young Woman. You will not, at least I hope you will not be disappointed. Now, my initial thoughts on A Quiet Place 2. Written and directed again by John Krasinski. Pretty much picks up right where the first one leaves off. You get a little flashback scene of when they start invading that little New York town. And then you transition to the present day, where Emily Blunt and her family try to make it to a certain place. Their daughter figures something out, and she wants to get to point A, while Emily Blunt's is trying to look for other survivors in a new place to set up rather than the one she's at. Along the way, they meet Cillian Murphy, which he was introduced in the very first scene of the movie, in the flashback scene. So, to be honest with you, if you slide John Krasinski out of this film, he's in it in backflashes. But they slide Cillian Murphy kind of into his place seamlessly. Yeah, say that again. Seamlessly. So basically, it's not as good as the first one, but it is a solid sequel. I thought the first one was just a tad better. I just like the story arc and the character arcs more in the mystery in the first one than I did this one. But man, what a solid sequel. What a way back to get to the theater. I really enjoyed it. I'll talk a little bit more about this movie next week. It is currently sitting at 90% critic score with a 94% audience score. I will say this one does focus on Emily Blunt's kids more than it does herself. And what a performance by Cillian Murphy, who I always enjoy. So that is my recommendation of the week. If you have a theater that's open, you want to go see a good movie to go back to, go see A Quiet Place 2. And that's it, folks. Thank you for bearing with me as I get my feet back under me with this initial episode. I think for the first time in 3 weeks. I am locked, cocked, and ready to rock. Go check me on the Facebook Media Mosh. Go to the Twitterverse at Shane Media Mosh. More importantly, go to the Apple Podcast Store. Download me, share me, let me into your friend's life. I promise I'll be more consistent. And then circle the wagons and check out Mr. Argue Myself, Chris Rodell, on the Instagram, the Facebook, and the Twitters. 3 different platforms for 3 different types of content. Until then, get caught up in the mosh.